views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Good evening and welcome to BronxTalk. In the dialogue about creating affordable and supportive housing is the realization that there already is existing underutilized space that could be put to good use. In particular, there appears to be significant available space that is owned by faith-based institutions in the Bronx and throughout the city. Into the breach steps LISC, L-I-S-C, the Local Initiatives Support Corporation, a nonprofit that works at trying to basically put two and two together, identify the need, and put them together with faith-based institutions that have the space. It's a fascinating concept that we will explore throughout the program tonight. In fact, two of their first projects are here in the borough of the Bronx. So we hope this will inspire some thought on reasonable ways to address housing needs as well as provide a financial boost to religious institutions. So please join me in welcoming the Community Development Officer for Local Initiatives Support Corporation, LISC. It is Grace Chung. Ms. Chung, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And the Rector of St. Luke's Episcopal Church, which is on East 222nd Street, Father Pierre-Andre Duvert. Nice to have you, sir.
Nice being here.
Ms. Chung, let's start with you. It's a fascinating concept. As you know, as soon as I heard about it, I was like, wow, this is so interesting, especially given the problems we have with housing and everything else in the Bronx. Talk to me about what LISC is and how you got to the point where you got involved in this project.
Sure. So what LISC is directly connected to this program. So LISC, the Local Initiative Support Corporation, we were founded here in New York City in 1980 in order to help nonprofit developers build affordable housing. And since then, we have grown to a national organization, but again, our roots are always here in New York City. We work with a number of nonprofit developers across the Bronx, MBD, Banana Kelly, to name a couple. And
excuse me, so you do that in order to basically help them facilitate whatever their process is to get to a point where they can provide and deliver housing.
Right, so LISC provides financing. We can think of us as a nonprofit bank in a way, so we provide lending for pre-development costs, construction costs, and then we also provide technical assistance. So we don't just give a loan, but we also provide support to nonprofit developers through the entire process.
Mm-hmm. And so how did we get to the point where you were doing all that fine work developing housing where you said, hey, somebody there probably presented it to a board and said, I got an idea. Let's start looking at churches and synagogues and mosques, et cetera.
Yep. So as you know, the environment in New York City has changed a lot since 1980 when LISC was founded, and there isn't a lot of available land anymore, and so we really need to be creative as nonprofit organizations in thinking about new partners to work with. And we had heard over and over from our community-based partners, from local elected officials reaching out to us saying, we've got these faith-based organizations in our neighborhoods. They have land, they want to develop for affordable housing because they're mission driven, but they don't have the real estate expertise. Can you help us?
So in essence, it was a group of people, a collaborative that got together and said, maybe we can figure this out. I mentioned it at the opening. is there an element of this, and Father Duvert, of course, is going to weigh in, and I'm going to get to him in a second, about the fact that many faith-based institutions are hurting financially, and they're like, gee, we have all this space, we're still paying the mortgage on the space, we can do better ourselves. Is that part of this as well?
That's a piece of it. So nationally, a lot of faith-based organizations are seeing dwindling congregations. That isn't the case for all churches, as you'll hear from Father Duvert's church. But it is a factor. And also in New York City in particular, we have a lot of historic churches. So as you'll see in this program, the average age for the church that is in this program is about 90 or 80 years old. So these are really old churches where upkeep is really expensive. And so by being able to combine rehab of church space with affordable housing, it's a win-win for the church and also for the community.
I will state it, but let's just clarify it. There are 5 that you're working with in this initial part of the project, and 2 of them are here in the BX.
That's correct.
That's great. All right, now we're going to talk to one of them, Father Duvert. It's so nice to have you. You were telling me beforehand about the wonderful things that you do in the church. Tell me just background before we get into this project about the church, some of its history, and you know, kind of the congregation.
St. Louis has been around for 104 years in the community, and the church is really active in the community as well. And we understand that our mission is to have a deeper relationship with God, and we've had that deeper relationship through serving others. So the call to serve our neighbors is very dear to us. We understand that religion isn't simply about praying and talking to God and having a faith. Faith compels us to care for others, and that's where we come in.
So they came to you, or you heard about this? Talk to me how this marriage happened, so to speak.
We were really working on a plan to develop the land, but at the same time we didn't know which way to go. And someone mentioned LISC to us, and I went to a workshop with someone else, and then went to another member of the congregation, and we met Grace, and we spoke to Grace, and then we said, gee, God has answered our prayers.
There you go. Especially they brought you somebody named Grace.
Yes!
I guess a coincidence or not, it is what it is. Talk to me about that space, though. So now we know that you have where the church where you do your services, but what other space
is
there?
So we have an empty lot behind the church, and also an old school.
A school that is used or not used?
It is being used at this time for a feeding program.
But it is like breakfast and lunch, you said.
And lunch program. Right. But it's an old building. So we will tear that building down and also use the space that is behind the building for the units. We also have an old church at 219th Street.
Right. We're going to show pictures, by the way. We have pictures of all that. So I'm going to let them talk, but then we'll get to it.
So we're going to use that church also, and the church has a parking lot and a rectory. So all those 3 lots will be used also for the development.
How many, Ms. Chung, how many units do you think you can get out of this? And I hope that people in the Bronx and elsewhere are listening and going, wow, whatever number she says, new units of housing in a community that is ready to welcome them. Win, 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 right? So let's talk about numbers.
Yeah, so it's too early to give exact numbers. We're right now working with the churches to figure out, not only the affordable housing component, but what kind of community space that they would want to include in their development. But through an initial review of the 5 properties, this project could yield up to 300, 400 units of housing. And that's, again, just for this pilot with 5 churches.
And now I know in the release and the other information that was put out, it says you're working with the city. I'm sure the city is thrilled beyond belief because certainly the mayor's plan, they want to build 20,000 units and all that. And again, like I described it, win, win, win. So the city is partnering, right?
Yes, so the city has been a partner from the very beginning of this program. It actually started when the Department of Housing Preservation and Urban Development, HPD, came to LISC and said that we are seeing this huge demand and we want to find a way to support these groups. Can LISC be a partner? And so LISC partnered with HPD. We brought in the Mayor's Communities Affairs Unit, and together we were able to raise philanthropic dollars from the private sector to support this pilot initiative.
Just before we show the photos, the last thing, I just want to get into the funding. So the funding comes through various grants, or they're private corporations, or they're lenders. Describe how that works, and then we're going to talk about the finances of
Sure.
the church as well.
So LISC is a nonprofit organization, so we do have to fundraise for all of this work.
That's why I asked.
Yep, yes, thank you. And the first funder to jump in and take this leap of faith with us was the Booth Ferris Foundation. And
The leap of faith.
The
Oh,
leap of faith.
That's so silly.
So then there was the Booth Ferris Foundation, Bank United, M&T, Deutsche Bank, and most recently Santander Bank have all joined in to support this initial pilot.
And there is no question, and I know Father, I'm going to say it and assuming he's going to agree with me, that if the church were to try to do this on their own, there was no way they could pull in that range of funders. These are people and organizations you, I assume, been working with for years.
Yes.
And when you present it to them, are they as enthusiastic as I am? I hope so.
They were very excited, and I think they were particularly excited once we actually were able to launch and bring all the churches together and meet the funders. Because
So you brought the 5 churches. There are 2 here and 3 in the other boroughs?
correct.
Right. In Manhattan, or where are they?
So there are 2 in Manhattan. There's
Right.
one in Murray Hill, and there's one in Harlem, and then there's one near Jamaica, Queens.
In Queens, okay.
Yep.
So now let's talk about the finances of the church. How does it work or interact with you, or you simply have to be kind of the willing sponsor and they get it done for you? In other words, are there finances that from the church that have to go into it?
At this stage, really, we do not know. We are being guided, coached by LISC on how to go about the whole thing. But as far as the finances are concerned, the finances of the church for the church ministry, it's a different ball game.
Right.
But when it comes to the development, we're going through a process with LISC.
Is there something that can help the church? In other words, you have land. I mean, if you develop on the land, we presume that you will.
That's
do
the goal.
okay.
The goal is really, it's a twofold goal. Really, one, to serve the community, but at the same time, we want to secure some finances for the church.
Great. Let's take a look at some of the pictures, and I'm going to ask, because folks who watch the show know that we're tuned. We know what people are saying about housing. We know what they're saying about affordable housing. We know what they're saying about supportive housing. We're going to get to that, but let's look at the church. We have I know we have photos of the church. So now this I guess it's almost an artist rendering, so to speak. This is what the church looks like without all the beautiful trees and life that has lived around it for many years. And then let's take a look at what it actually looks like for people who walk by. That's the interior.
Yes.
And you, by the way, let's leave that for 1 second. You see the TV screen. Father Duvera was describing to me that he puts his sermons on a PowerPoint. What an innovative, clever idea. And he has it has nothing to do with the development or anything else, but I just thought it was a fascinating idea. And it really helps illustrate things that you want to say. And I'm sure the many congregants love it. Okay, keep going. Let's take a look. Okay, so now this is actually what the church looks like if you walk by 222nd Street right now. Okay, beautiful, beautiful surroundings. And I think the next picture is the one that really is fascinating. So now that left part of the building, like maybe Father Duvera, you can describe what we're
So
looking
you
at.
see that lower building, that's the old school.
Right.
And then
that's going to come down?
That's going to come down.
Okay.
And also behind that lower building, we have the empty space.
Wow.
And that will be used as well.
Do we know how high the ultimate buildings will be?
At this time, we do not know. We're still in the process of learning
Scooped them
what
all.
can be
All right.
done.
All right. And then there was another property, I think, Ms. Chung, you mentioned. Now, this is something also managed or owned by the church?
Yes, owned by the church.
Okay,
219th
let's take
Street.
it's on 219th Street. What is on that? Let's take a look at that if we can, folks. What is on that property?
It's an old building, an old church building.
An
St.
old church
George's,
building,
yes.
used or unused?
It's not being used at this time.
Well, there's your underutilized space. So here,
Exactly.
and people in the community, and there's another look at that same area.
So there is the old building, and there is the parking lot, and also the rectory. All three will be used.
So when you, thanks folks for putting up those pictures. So when you move from much beloved pastor to housing developer, are there going to be people in the community who are going to say, much like we're hearing all over the Bronx, what are you doing? We don't want this in our neighborhood. how is that process going to work? That whatever you put down is going to be conformed or within the framework of what the neighborhood desires. This is a big thing in the Bronx.
I know, but we do hope and pray. First of all, let me say that we have established a good rapport with the members of the community. We have
many of them I just walk into the church Sunday
yes,
mornings.
and we have the community board and also members of the block association. They meet at the church, so they know of the plan for us to.
And they bought into it.
Yes, because they know it's something that we are doing that would benefit the community as well.
The balance and the dialogue that we hear, and I don't have to list the numbers of, some of them are actually in the Northeast Bronx, the number of neighborhoods in the Bronx that are saying we know that there needs to be a place for people in need. We know that there are people who need support, but this doesn't belong in a residential community. In terms of the aspect of supportive housing, affordable may be one thing, but when you start talking about supportive housing and people in neighborhoods, they're going to say, we don't want this in our neighborhood, despite the fact that, frankly, many of them on the other side will say, although we do know that people need support. Talk to me about that balance and how you view maybe bringing in people who need all different kinds of support, whether it be healthcare support or were formerly incarcerated or homeless people or whomever it is. Talk to me about that balance.
At this stage, we have not determined exactly what it's going to be. But one thing I can tell you, the role of the church is to be a light. And if you're light, you guide.
Okay.
You know, in the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus said, let your light so shine before all, so they can see your good works. And if you're light, you ought to be able to lead people. There are times we find that folks may not agree. But unless you let your light shine, folks may not be able to see what the possibilities may be. So that's the role of the church.
And clearly your vision is very clear on that. There's no shaking that. As hard as I try to be a hard politician here. But Ms. Chung, let's talk about the realities of putting in, again, supportive housing. In many cases, it needs a social service component or it needs a community component. Are these things going to be in this process in some form?
So one of the things that's really important to just first clarify is that the New York Land Opportunity Program, NYLOP, was founded not to turn the churches into developers, since they are so good at what they're doing already in the community, but rather to help them to find the right developer partner to work with, whether that be a supportive housing developer that is experienced in that type of work or an affordable housing developer like the nonprofit Sedlisk works with.
So what you're saying is it will all be dealt with over time. The collaborative process that Father Duvert described, I'm assuming that's what you're going to endorse and engage in as well.
Yes, so the program entails, it's a technical assistance program, so LISC is not providing grant funding to the churches to develop on their own. We're providing pro bono architectural, legal, and financing assistance to the churches to guide them through the process of evaluating their land to see the development potential on what they can do on these 3 lots in Father Duvert's case, and then working with the churches to develop a request for proposals so that they can formally have a formal process for selecting a developer partner. And once the churches select their developer partner, they are off.
Then they're off and running,
yes,
so to speak.
Yes, exactly.
Talk to me about the kind of the qualifications that you would need, and it seems very obvious why this particular institution fits perfectly. But when you look about and say, well, who should be part of this, and talk to me about the kind of the profile of the 5 churches that made it worthwhile for this first project.
So we had a very intensive application process to get down to these 5 churches.
I can imagine, yeah.
We had we first started off with 4 workshops across the city, including one in the Bronx, where we had over 300 participants come out from around the city, including Father Duvert. From those 300 participants, we had 33 letters of interest from different organizations around the city that we narrowed down to 10 finalists down to these 5 churches.
Wow. And how long did that take?
That was about a 6-month process just for the application process.
While, yeah.
But the workshops we launched last October.
And then let's talk about the timing of the whole thing in terms of, I mean, because now clearly some of the stuff that we've been addressing is still speculative. Lay out how you see this happening till at what point, I guess eventually we'll have people either living on that space.
So this program is in progress right now. As tomorrow we will be having a legal workshop at our office. So Father Duvere will be back at List New York City's office. And the goal is that by the end of the year, all 5 churches will have released a request for proposal to developers, and will then be able to negotiate a joint venture partnership with support from a legal grant from List New York City. And within the next couple years or so, we'll hopefully be able to start building affordable housing.
And maybe I could be there for the ribbon cutting. Wouldn't that be exciting? Father Duvere, just learning about the training and all, you must have gotten, you and others and colleagues must have gotten quite an education in this, because I'm sure it's moved you into areas you probably never thought you would be involved in.
You know, we're learning a lot, and one thing that is for which I'm grateful, we are grateful, is the fact that we know that we will be partnered with folks who are trustworthy. And we hear so many stories about churches and what can happen. But
well, listen, I'll go the other side, to developers and what can happen.
Yes, and but this guarantees that we will have a partner that will match our dreams or with our vision, and who also is not going to just come to get just what he or she wants, but that will make sure that whatever the plan is, it becomes a reality.
It works, you know, and I guess my little editorial comment would be nice for the city to learn a little bit out of this process and say that if it's a truly collaborative process that includes, you were talking about having the community board involved, and certainly elected officials and community members involved in the dialogue, and then you come out with a successful project. Boy, we'd love to see that.
And it's something that can be replicated.
Well, that really is my next line of questioning is, as viewers know, when we do these kinds of things that are kind of like imagine how this could go, I'd love for other people in the Bronx to see this and think about, wait a minute, and it doesn't have to be a church, can be a mosque or a synagogue or whatever, has available space. How can we do it? Talk to me about kind of, I guess, advice for folks who may be watching this and saying, gee, can we do this in our neighborhood? I mean, what advice, or what would you say?
You know, at this time, I don't want to go too deep into giving advice, because we are
Because you're
still
still
learning.
in the middle of it. Okay,
we are
fair
still
enough.
learning. But what we hope, though, is that at the end of the process, we'll be so enlightened that we are able to give advice at that stage.
Right.
Then we can tell folks, these are the pitfalls, these are the things we learned, these are things that you can do to really get where you want to be. So when we'll be
I'll
prepared.
call you back, you can come in.
We'll be prepared at that stage.
And Ms. Chung, let's just talk in a way, a similar vein. What are the kind of obstacles that are concerning that you say, well, we've got to navigate this, that, or the other? What are the things that might get in the way?
So there are a few.
I'm sure.
At least a few.
Really a tremendous concept, though, I have to say.
So one thing about faith-based organizations is they have more complicated hierarchical systems. So there's a decision-making process that you have to navigate when it comes to a major decision like development. And so one of the things that we built into our application process was making sure that for churches that are part of a hierarchical organization like the Episcopals or the Methodists, that we weren't just getting the stamp of approval from the pastor.
He
but
says
we were,
okay, there's probably
And then
Right.
the bishop doesn't say, oh,
Exactly.
Boy.
And
You'll hear about it, I'm sure.
Yep.
Right. So that's
that-
part of a challenge. That's very
definitely
interesting.
a challenge. And then what you just mentioned earlier about the community engagement piece. So one of the criteria that we were looking at for churches and for any organization in this program was, are you rooted in your community? Are you engaged in your community? Is this something that you've talked about with people in your neighborhood?
So that you don't come up against some of the things that I was expressing earlier.
Exactly.
Yeah. Are there next steps? Do you already say to yourself, gee whiz, this seems to be going okay? let's broaden it, or are you going to be cautious at this point, get the 5 done, and then you'll start figuring out what to do next?
We're really laser focused on these 5 groups right now. This is still very much a pilot program. This is the first time in LIST's nearly 40-year history that we're doing something like this in New York City, and so we're focused on making this pilot successful, and the hope is that we could potentially replicate this.
Mm-hmm. If you were to take a step back and look in general, do you see either a model that this has been modeled after, or are we really paving the way to something brand new and it's never really been looked at in this way before?
So LISC has done this type of work before. Just recently we worked with a nonprofit out of Harlem to help them partner with another developer so that they could work together on a development project. So we've helped organizations do this matchmaking process before. We've worked with another developer in the Bronx actually to help them partner with a church. But this is the first time that we really have this type of structured program specifically for groups that have no real estate experience. So we are really building this program as we're going.
And we were the first time on TV talking about it,
Yes.
right? So we got the exclusive. Father DeVere, I'll let you kind of wrap it up. When you put your head on the pillow at night and you think of
I
this,
sleep.
you think of this mammoth project. What are the things that you say to yourself, well, this is probably the right direction for us?
You know, there is an Archbishop of the Anglican Church that said that the church is the only organization that exists not for the sake of its members. And what he meant by that, if we find that we are serving ourselves, we are not following the mission to which we are called. But if we find that we are tackling the problems facing our community, then
And you've done it.
then we have done it.
You've done it. It's the first time I ever filled in words for a pastor. Thank you so much, Father DeVere. And Ms. Chung, if people want to get in touch with you and start to explore, because I'm sure you're willing to find out who's
Absolutely.
out there, how do they get in touch with you?
They can reach out to me. My email address is gchung@lisc.org.
So simple. Hey, thanks for opening our eyes, for giving us all a little more vision, and good luck with the project.
Thank
and
you.
I'd like to think you're going to be in touch with me because we want to celebrate. I definitely want to be there for that ribbon cutting. That's going to be exciting.
Thanks
Father
for having
DeVere,
us.
thank
Thank you.
And Grace Chung, thank you. Folks, if you have further questions or comments on anything you heard on tonight's show or anything going on in our borough of the Bronx, then email them to us at bronxtalk@bronxnet.org. You can send us a tweet at BronxTalk, or you post it on our Facebook page and we'll read it on the air during a future edition of the program. You can check out the archives at bronxnet.org. You can find Bronx Talk by following the Watch menu on the new BronxNet website. Now, next week, fascinating show, another fascinating show, groundbreaking program that could very well help address one of the borough's most serious health problems, diabetes. We will be joined by the Diabetes Relief Centers, who will soon be opening a huge facility in the South Bronx using newly developed innovative techniques to fight the scourge of diabetes in the Bronx. It is something you will want to see and know about, I can assure you. So make sure you're with us next Monday night and through the week. Thanks to our producer, Lindsay. Our director is William. Thanks to the cast of thousands who are here, to you, to them. And we'll see you next week. Good night.